Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel about Invictus, a role-playing game I've been developing for a while and I now want to share with all of you. So this is our first video in a series which was called How to Play. My name is David Wilson. Online I'm often known as Maltharian on Reddit and other such spaces. I want to welcome you to the channel. First thing I want to do is ask you to feed the algorithm. This tells YouTube that other people might also want to see the content that I'm making. So if you think that's true, please make sure to like and subscribe. Subscription is free. I don't want people to get confused if you're newer to YouTube. Subscribe just means that you might want to see my videos in your video feed more often. All right. So here we go. Let's talk quickly about some of our system goals again so we're all on the same page. We want a dependable dice system with meaningful averages, right? I no longer like the idea of I'm going to roll a d20 and be just as likely to get every value under the sun. In here, we're developing a system in which when we roll the dice, we have a pretty good idea of what we're going to get. We still have randomness because that's what makes it fun, but we've got a pretty dependable outcome. We also want our flavor text to be honest, right? No longer is text going to say, you do this massively powerful, awesome thing, and then like you don't. So we want our flavor text to match the game experience. We also think combat should be fun. We want all players engaged constantly. No more 20 minutes in between turns. We want combat to be fast. We don't want to be looking up rules constantly, figure out how does this rule interact with that rule. That's boring as hell. We don't want it. We also want combat to be deadly. I want there to be real risk, which might lead some people to say, well, then why would I get into a fight? That's a great question. You should have a reason to get into a fight. Fights can be so dull in role-playing games, but when there's real stakes on the line, when it's really engaging, those fights are fun. When you just survive that fight, your party just makes it through. Those are the stories that we tell for years afterwards. That's our goal. When we have fights, they mean something. One of the ways we accomplish these goals is by having a death spiral. Death spiral means taking damage hurts. No more swinging your sword just as effectively at one hit point, but that's also true for the monsters, right? When you hurt that ogre, he stops swinging as hard. That's a meaningful goal. You've had a good outcome on that game. We also want a single roll resolution mechanic, right? No more rolling to hit and then rolling for damage, rolling to dodge, rolling to do, everything is one roll. And on that roll, if you roll higher, you do better. But the roll also opens up what we call narrative opportunities, which is reflected through our system of Surge, and we'll talk about that a little bit more today. So, how do you play? First things first, pick up 3d6. I'm going to be really honest with folks here. When I have explained this game to people in person, they often will say the following: the game makes a lot of intuitive sense. And I'm like, that's great. Well, why did they say that? Because initially it seemed really complicated and confusing. But they say, once I get it, I get it. Hopefully the same will be true for you too. All right, so how do you play? The player says, this is what I want to do. What might you want to do? You might want to climb a wall. So I'd say, great, get your 3d6, add your strength and athletics score to it. I might want to sneak past the guards. Great, grab your 3d6 and add your agility and your stealth to it. I want to alter a magical effect. What do I mean by that? Let's say you come across a magical shield. That's going to prevent most people from passing through it. However, if you're a mage, you have the ability to alter magic that's in effect. And you don't necessarily have to know the magic that was used to make it. You know magic. So you might be able to make a hole in the shield and pass through it. You might be able to transfer the shield to a different object. In this game, I really want a mage to feel like they've got the ability to modify their world. If you've read something really cool in fiction that a magic user could do, I hope that you find that in this game. Other things we could do. I want to spot scouts. I think that there are people looking for us as we're traveling. That'd be your wits plus your awareness. I want to bluff the shopkeeper and either let him think I'm not going to buy something, or I could get it for cheaper down the road. That's charisma and persuasion. I want to draw an elemental to my cause. What do I mean by that? Well, there's elementals that make the world work, right? There isn't gravity, so to speak, in this world. There is the essence of earth that draws down to the ground. And so if you want to increase the effect of what we would call gravity in our world, then you want to increase the way the elementals interact with things. So that's something you might be able to do, but you wouldn't necessarily have to know how to manipulate that essence yourself if you found an elemental creature and got it to do it for you. Say you want to attack someone with your scimitar. You'd need strength plus arms. If you want to shoot a bow, that's agility plus archery. Okay, so these are just some of the many actions that your character could conduct in play. Everything starts with 3d6. All right, let's look at, all right, so what is the action sequence? Remember, we always start with 3d6. So you have 3d6 plus your skill dice, plus your attribute, plus your equipment. How does that work? Skills give you new dice. They give you things like a d4, a d6, a d8, a d10, a d12. If you don't know dice very well, there's the d4. This is the 6, the 8, the 10, the 12. Okay? They add that to your die pool, right? You roll those dice. You note any that say a 6 or higher. That's called surge. And then you add your accuracy. Where does accuracy come from? Accuracy comes from your attributes. All of your attributes are going to give you a rating of either -3 to +3 that simply adds to your total. Skills give you new dice that help make you more dependable. So what do? You roll your 3d6. If you have any skill dice, you also roll those. You add your attribute bonus, and then sometimes equipment gives us accuracy. Sometimes equipment gives us power, things of that nature. Okay. So then you have an action difficulty that you're trying to target. An easy action is 9. An average action is 11, a tough is 13, hard is 15, right? These terms may change to be easier and more clear for you to understand. If you're doing an unopposed action, that means like something against the environment. I'm trying to climb that wall. I'm trying to force this door open, right? It's something where no one is trying to actively oppose you. When you do attack actions, right? These are fast, sudden sorts of things. Instead of there being, I attack you and you roll to dodge, what happens in this game is I attack you and you get your dodge rating. And your dodge rating, as we're going to see in a moment, is just how good at dodging you are on average. Then sometimes we have opposed actions in which it doesn't really make a lot of sense for only one person to roll. So say you've got two people, one person running away and one person chasing them, right? In that sort of case, each person's going to roll to see how much or how hard you guys are able to run compared to each other. You got two people doing a tug of war or pushing on a door. The same sort of idea is there. You're each going to roll as an opposed action using these difficulties and then comparing how well you do. All right, so then we have this system called effect. And that is you basically take the total of your die roll and your accuracy and you subtract from it the action difficulty. If you hit your number, so if your action difficulty was, say, a tough action, difficulty 13, as long as you get a 13, you succeed, period. You don't have to get a 15 or a 16. The number is 13. So if you hit a 13, you succeed, and that's what we call a success. However, if you get 4 above that number, so if you needed a 13 but you get a 17, that means you critically succeed. You not only did well, but you have cleared other hurdles that may have also been present. Then we have what we call a mixed success or a partial failure. The naming here is a little bit in flux. And this is meant to be, you may have accomplished what you were trying to get, so you needed a 13 to do something, but you roll a 12. Is that just a hard failure? It doesn't have to be. This is a place in which the GM and the player can work out what that effect looks like to keep the story moving forward. So if you're trying to climb something and you get a 12, that might mean you get 2/3 of the way up there and now you're stuck. And you're trying to figure out what's the best route up because some of the rocks gave loose or something of that nature. A critical failure, however, is when you completely miss something, so by 4 or more. So if you needed a 13 to do that tough action and you roll a 9, that means you have completely failed. You didn't get off the ground. Maybe you slipped right away. And again, that's a narrative choice of the player and the game master are going to work out to keep things moving. This is not an adversarial game. This is not a game in which the player and the game master are battling over what's going to happen, where the players are keeping secret their plans and the game master is keeping secret their plan. Your game master is basically God of your game, right? They can make anything too hard for you to succeed, and that sucks for everybody. So this is meant to be a collaborative storytelling system in which you work together to figure out what the best outcome is. And then I'm providing for you models of how to interpret your dice rolls to be most interesting for you. Okay, so what are these attributes and skills that we have? We start out, we have what we call physical attributes. These are things like strength and agility, how strong you are, how your physique is, how you're able to move your body. This is not just like raw, I have muscles, I can't move myself. I don't think that's necessarily very interesting in a role-playing game. This is really more of like your physique. Then there's your agility. How fast are you? What's your reaction time? How quickly can you move your body? That sort of thing. Then we have mental and social attributes. Initially, I had these divided between here's your mental attribute, here's your social attribute, but I found that those overlapped so often that it was really kind of awkward enforcing those differences. So I've simply said physical stuff, mental, and social stuff together. So you have your intellect. What's your raw mental power? And I've placed this here so you can sort of think of it that way. How strong am I? How strong is my intellect? How quick of wit am I? How perceptive am I? How much can I think under pressure? What sorts of things can I accomplish there? That's analogous to your wits. So wits is going to play a dual role between a social and a mental attribute. And that's part of why these things are mixed together. Then we have charisma, which is the strength of your personality, how well you can draw people in with your conversations, etc. And then next we have spirit. Spirit is a little bit of a catch-all category. It represents your character's innate connection to the spiritual world around you, as well as your courage, your willpower, and in some sense your luck. In this game, we take the view that characters have a connection to luck, and spirit is that attribute that you would use when you needed to check that. Next, we have physical skills. So archery, arms might be called fencing in other game systems. It's your ability to use mostly one-handed weapons. Next, we have arms, two hands, and this is primarily for your great weapons, your long swords, things of that nature. Finally, next we have athletics. Athletics is your overall physical conditioning, your ability to climb and do things like that. We've got your battle skill. This is formal battle training. This is how well you can fight in unit formation, how well you can fight wearing armor, using shields, things of that nature. Then we have brawl. Brawl is meant to be your unarmed battling. This can be anything from bar brawling to martial arts. This is when I'm grabbing another person, what am I able to do? And then finally, in our physical skills, we have stealth. Okay, then we have our mental and our social skills. So animals might be known as animal canon in another system. I didn't like that it was my only skill that was really one word only, two words, so I made it a one-word skill. Then we've got Arcana, which is your ability to understand magic and lore, right? We live in a post-apocalyptic, this game is set in a post-apocalyptic setting. That is, there was some high magical society beforehand. That society got destroyed. Some of those magical items still exist. And if you encounter one and you want to figure out how to use it, Arcana is your skill for that. Awareness represents your alertness to the world around you, as well as your ability to understand and sense spirits. Crafting is your ability to make stuff, right? In this game, you can make your own magic items. You can make your own potions, things like that. We've got our persuasion skill. How well can I convince someone to do what I want? We have our presence skill, which is, in a sense, a combination of leadership, stage presence, things of that nature. If you want to stand up and give a really powerful speech to an audience, you need presence, right? You might be persuasive in a one-on-one setting, but if you really want to cast onto a crowd, you want presence. Presence will also include any musical talent, acting, things of that nature. Then statecraft is another kind of catch-all skill for us that includes things like bureaucracy and diplomacy, how to sign treaties and work stuff out like that. Subterfuge is going to represent your ability to be sneaky and tricky, your guile. If you want to pickpocket, subterfuge is that skill you're going to go to. Survival, how well can you exist outdoors? But it's not just how well can you exist in the outdoors. It's also, in some sense, your travel, right? In this setting, we have multiple realms that overlap, and you can accidentally cross from one realm to another. Survival is a skill that you use to make sure that's harder to do. Ttrpg is your ability with rituals and rites. It's also, in some sense, your ability to teach and to educate, so that's what that skill is there. If you want to interact with the elemental in the previous example, Ttrpg is your way to do that. Then, how do these things actually affect stuff? Well, normally speaking, players start with attributes between 7 and 13. And that's going to give you a bonus from -2 to +3. And then if you're at the peak that you can sort of start the game, that would also give you a power. So that would also upgrade anytime you're rolling those 3d6. One of those d6 would become a d8. Then we have our skill dice. So your skills are going to have a rating of somewhere between 0 and 6. In play, however, that's really going to generally be between 0 and 4. And that's going to be the die that you add to that roll to make it work better. What the advantage of having a nice 3d6 system does for us, and having these dice add things in a nice incremental way, is that we have meaningful averages. So I know that 70% of the time, you're going to hit your average plus or minus 3. So if your average rating is a 14, when you roll those dice, you're going to be between an 11 and a 17 around 70% of the time. And so that lets us set ratings. So for example, you could have a block rating, and that's your strength plus your battle plus however good your shield is. So for example, if your strength was a 12 and your skill was a 2, that would give you a rating of 14 for blocking plus your shield, which might be 1 or 2 as well. Oops. I'm going to try to go back a slide here. Okay, and then for parrying, same idea. It's your agility plus your arms plus however good your weapon is for parrying. Your dodge is going to be your agility plus your brawl less your armor, right? If you're wearing heavy armor, it's harder to move your body out of the way. And so this is our system. When I want to attack you, I'm not really attacking you, I'm attacking your ratings of defense. So while other games might have armor class that says this is how hard my armor is to reach or penetrate, and that might be affected by your agility, this is more based on your skills and your body and your equipment. So there is more complexity here, but I think it leads to richer gameplay. All right. So Surge, how does Surge roll with this game? Right? Anytime you roll 6 to 9 on a single die, this is not your dice total, but you roll your individual dice and you look at them, and if there's a 6 to a 9 on them, you gain 1 Surge. If there's a 10 to a 12, you gain 2 Surge. You're not going to see that kind of Surge a lot in early play because you need a D10 or a D12, so it requires a lot of power, a lot of skill, but it will come throughout. Okay. So how do you spend Surge, right? We talked about this in our prior video about game mechanics. We can spend Surge to make our effect better. That is, if we succeed, we can increase the success of our effect, which can then cause critical stuff. We could also use Surge to make our action faster, to make it quieter, to make it hidden, to make it showy, to make it to bring serendipity, to change the narrative game state. If you also do really well, that is a critical success, and you have Surge, you can help another person within your party. Surge can be spent on success or failure, right? So this isn't binary, I succeed, binary, I fail. This is, I have partial success, I have total success, I have critical success. Maybe I completely fail. Maybe you completely fail, you biff, you fall on your butt, but you say, you know what, I got a point of Surge, I'm going to spend that to make it really quiet. So I was sneaking up, I slipped on the ice, I fell down, but I, skilled enough to land and make sure I didn't make noise when I hit. Surge, again, can be spent on success or failure, and you're going to get more Surge the more skilled you are. All right. How does Surge work in combat? Because right now, that's the out-of-combat Surge. So in combat, any person can do any of these things when they roll Surge. And I say any of these things, but there might be a skill restriction on them at some point. We'll talk about that later. So the easiest thing you can always do is to add more damage, and probably the option most people are going to do. But I want to talk about what are the other things that one could do. So another thing you could do is defend yourself a little bit. So this would represent you got a really good strike, but you're able to keep your presence of mind, and you're able to pull back and gain some defense. So that defense, instead of being extra damage, you'd add to your parry, dodge, or block until your next turn. If you've ever watched a movie in which two people are fighting one another, and in the middle of them punching and swinging, one of them draws a knife, that comes out in this place here. So if you get a Surge on an attack, instead of doing extra damage, or even if you were dodged, right? So you attack and they dodge you, and you had a Surge, you could use it to draw a new weapon. You could flip. You could kick an object, right? So you knock someone's weapon out of their hand. Let's say you're trying to disarm someone. You knock a weapon out of their hand and you had a Surge. You could then use that Surge to kick that weapon away, right? If you didn't have the Surge, or you had to use the Surge to make sure it worked, there wouldn't be that timing opportunity. Pound or punch. I remember watching a video on YouTube not that long ago. I wish I remembered which one it was. and some warrior or some fighter, it was a D&D video, some fighter like punched his opponent. It was the right thing to do, was to punch his opponent. And he looked at his game master and he said, I've never punched someone in D&D. I've been playing fighters for 30 years. And that's something that happens in this game. So you can punch someone, making them more open to attack future. So you're like, you know what? That one extra damage I would do isn't the best thing right now. Instead, punching them and lowering their defense to everyone is the better thing to do. So this is really meant to be a team-based game. Your team is working together, doing things to get your opponents off balance and uncomfortable so that you can take advantage of them. You can shield punch with someone. So if you punch, or say you attack someone and they block you, and you've got a shield, but you had surge, well, you don't just fail, you can now shield punch them with it, causing their defenses to get lower. You can also step. Step means move one hex, right, or move one square. So you get an attack and you step to the side, blocking someone's path. In this game, I'll talk about this much more later in combat, but I don't do attacks of opportunity. I find them to be pretty dull, but I do have something called a preemptive strike, and that is if anyone ever tries to walk past you. So recently, I've been learning some longsword techniques and at a local HEMA club, and what I've learned is that backing up from an opponent is not hard. The most simply skilled swordsman can back away from an opponent without triggering an attack. It's just not a thing. I don't know why D&D has it. But if I want to go past an opponent, if I want to walk around you to get to what's behind you, I'm opening myself up to an attack. So I want movement to be impactful. I want where you're standing on the battlefield to be impactful. I don't want someone to just walk by you. Everyone has kind of the sentinel feat in this game. So if I try to move past someone and they attack and they hit me, that's going to bring me to a stop. So fighters can defend the back ranks. Vanguards can defend the back ranks. People can do things tactically to control motion. So these are some of the other things that you might be able to do off of this. So disarms. Let's say you get a really good attack and you decide you want to disarm your opponent during that attack. Instead of doing extra damage, you could use 2 surge to attempt that disarm. Now, some of these things are actually actions. Some of them, meaning there's another die roll to make them happen. Some of them are automatic. That's something we're going to get into much, much later in the game. I just wanted to give you a taste of what Surge can allow. So again, Surge is this narrative mechanic to allow more things to occur in battle. Another one I have here is Grapple. So let's say you get a really good attack on someone, you've got 2 Surge, or you don't. Let's say you attack someone and they completely block you, but you've got 2 Surge. That means your body's in the right position to do something. So you might try to grapple him. So that, this fighter, he just can't hit, throws his shield up, and you now grab a hold of him. And now he can't use that shield to defend himself, right? Not very well. Once you're grappling, things like arming swords are no longer useful. Things like long swords are no longer useful, at least not unless you're going to half sword. We'll get into all of that much, much later. I just wanted to, like I said, give you a taste of how that's going to work coming down the road. All right. So again, Surge represents narrative opportunity. You score more Surge as your skills improve. You see and take advantage of little opportunities. You've got this dynamic back and forth system. All right. So now I want to talk about why these difficulties, why are the numbers set where I've set them. I really think action difficulty should be fluid. That is, a player says, I want to do something, and the GM says, I don't know, I think that's pretty hard to do. You might say, well, it's harder than it would take for an average person. Maybe it should be tough. There should be a chat back and forth. I mean, ultimately, it's the game master's call, right? You shouldn't sit there and argue about this sort of thing at the table, but there should be conversation. All right, so action difficulty should be fluid. On average, and this is a gross average, but on average, +1 in this game is 12%. Okay, so if you gain +1 more, that's 12% more likely you're going to get that result. Your average roll is always your attribute plus your skill. So if your strength is a 10 and your arms is a 4, on average you're going to roll a 14. Okay, 70% of the time, roughly speaking, this is a bell curve, so this is what we call a standard deviation, if you know that sort of thing. Roughly speaking, ±3 is our standard deviation. That's where your roll is going to be. And so I suggest you try it out, right? So if you've got a strength of 10, that means you're rolling 3d6, you're adding 1 to it, right? So on average, you're going to get an 11 on that roll, okay? And then athletics of 4 means that you're going to add to that a d8. So you pick up 3d6 and a d8, roll them, drop your lowest die. Do that 10 times. You're going to find your average is a 14. So this gives you a nice, meaningful average, and it works. And if you try this, put it down in the comments. Let me know you've tried this. I'd love to see you give it a shot. Okay? So now the question is, what do you want to see next? I've got a couple ideas. Let's see what resonates with the audience. How to play part 2. More rules and how this works. How does saving throws work? How does character creation work? Specifically character creation. Genos, that's what my term for races. Do you want to see class abilities and really see a deep dive in how some of those work? Do you want to look at domain abilities? These are the special abilities that are shared by multiple classes that you can kind of learn a la carte. Do you want to see some actual combat examples? As I said in an earlier video, I do Scimitar versus Gladius. Maybe we want to see that. Weapons and armor, what's the design philosophy behind that? Again, I like historical accuracy, so I'm going for a plausible system. Spell casting, we have what's called a spell weaving system, in which you take thread spells and you put them into patterns and you make your own spells. Lore and world building, or other. Put in the comments below. I want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. I ask you again to please like and subscribe. It does help the channel grow. I put a lot of energy into this system, and I really do want to share it with you. So please feel free to comment down below, ask questions. I've also got my email listed in the channel description if you'd rather just send me an email. If you find this interesting, I also invite you to join us on Discord. We're having a lot of fun over there. Thank you so much.